It was a warm, bright afternoon, the kind of day that makes the city feel alive. Birds were chirping, children's laughter echoed from a nearby playground, and the streets were dotted with people enjoying the sun. A young black girl moved slowly down the sidewalk in her wheelchair. Her hair was braided neatly, catching the sunlight with small hints of color from the beads at the ends. She had a backpack strapped lightly to the back of her wheelchair, filled with her sketchbooks and pencils because she loved to draw wherever she went. She was not alone. A couple of her friends were walking beside her, laughing and talking softly. They were chatting about school projects, funny stories from their week, and a movie they wanted to see. The girl smiled quietly, enjoying the conversation and the feeling of the sun on her face. Her wheelchair had smooth wheels, but the small incline on the sidewalk made her push a little harder, and she did so without complaining. She liked the challenge. It made her feel strong. Suddenly, the roar of a motorcycle broke through the calm chatter. The sound was loud and harsh, bouncing off the buildings and startling the people nearby. A biker came into view, riding fast, wearing a shiny black leather jacket with silver studs. His helmet reflected the sunlight in a blinding glare. He slowed down when he saw the girl struggling slightly with the incline, and a mean smirk appeared on his face. "Hey, little girl, you need a push? Or maybe a handout?" He shouted mockingly, his voice dripping with sarcasm. People nearby stopped for a moment, looking at the scene. Some frowned, while others looked away uncomfortably. The girl's friends tensed, their faces showing worry and anger. They knew that some people could be cruel, but they had not expected it to happen so openly in the middle of the street. The girl paused for a second, gripping the wheels of her chair. She felt her heart race, a mix of surprise and hurt. She had faced challenges before, and people had stared or whispered. But being mocked so directly was different. She could hear the biker's laughter, loud and harsh, as he circled back a little, clearly enjoying the attention. The biker continued, "Come on, speed up, slowpoke. Or maybe you need training wheels for that thing." His friends, who were riding with him, laughed along, slapping their thighs and pointing at her. Some of the passers-by murmured among themselves, but no one stepped in yet. The girl's friends moved closer, forming a small protective barrier around her. The girl took a deep breath. She wanted to respond, but she also knew that the wrong words could make the situation worse. Her hands rested lightly on the wheels, steadying herself. Her mind raced with thoughts: how to stay calm, how to show that she was not afraid, how to handle someone who clearly enjoyed making others feel small. While the biker mocked her, the world continued around them. A couple walked their dog a few meters away. Two men were sitting on a bench chatting over coffee. A street musician played soft tunes on his guitar. All of them watched, some openly curious, some quietly uneasy. But then something caught the girl's eye. Across the street, near a large poster for a charity event, stood two tall figures who seemed out of place. They were famous men, instantly recognizable to anyone who followed wrestling or movies. One of them had a strong, muscular build and a friendly, confident smile. The other was taller still, with a serious, commanding presence but eyes that seemed to see everything clearly. They were observing the scene carefully. The girl felt a spark of hope. She did not know who they were exactly at first, but there was something about their stance and the way they watched that made her feel less alone. They weren't laughing. They weren't ignoring the situation. They were watching, and somehow that made a difference. The biker, noticing that he was getting attention beyond his group, decided to push further. "What's the matter? Can't handle a little fun? I'm just trying to help you learn to move faster." He shouted, his voice dripping with mock kindness, which made it worse. Some people started taking out their phones, ready to record, sensing that the situation might escalate. The girl's friends whispered to her, encouraging her to stay calm. They reminded her that the biker's words were mean, but they did not define her. They whispered things like, "You're strong. You don't have to answer him," and "We've got your back." Their voices were steady, reassuring. She nodded slightly, holding on to their support like a lifeline. The girl finally found her voice. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She spoke clearly, her words measured and calm, carrying more power than the biker expected. "You think this is funny," she said. "But laughing at someone because of who they are or what they can't do says more about you than it does about me." Her words were steady, with just enough strength to make him pause. The biker's smirk faltered for a moment. He looked at her like he hadn't expected anyone to talk back. The crowd around them shifted slightly, murmuring and nodding at the girl's courage. She could feel the energy changing. People were starting to root for her, and the bikers' control over the scene began to weaken. The two famous men across the street took a step forward, their presence becoming more noticeable. They didn't shout or make any sudden moves, but just standing there watching the situation made the biker uneasy. He glanced at them, realizing that this was no longer just a fun joke at someone else's expense. Something about their stance said that they would not let cruelty go unchecked. The girl kept her eyes on the biker, maintaining her calm. She felt a strange mix of fear and courage. She could do this. She could handle this. Her friends were close, supporting her silently but strongly. And now, with the presence of people who seemed to command respect, she felt even more determined not to let the biker see her as weak. The biker tried one last time to assert himself. "You think you're smart? You think you can talk back?" He sneered, circling her slowly, but his confidence was faltering. The crowd was no longer laughing. Some were stepping closer to the girl, ready to support her, and others were shaking their heads in disapproval. Even the biker's friends looked uncertain now, sensing that the situation was getting serious. The girl's hands gripped the wheels tightly. She knew she couldn't show fear, and she didn't. She responded again, her voice calm but firm. "I don't need your approval. I don't need you to laugh. I know who I am, and your words don't change that." There was a quiet power in her voice, a strength that could not be shaken by mockery. Across the street, the famous men nodded slightly at each other, recognizing the courage in the girl. They began moving closer, not to threaten but to support. Their presence alone was enough to change the energy in the air. The biker's laughter died down, replaced by nervous shifting and uncertain looks. He was losing control of the situation. The girl felt a sense of relief but stayed vigilant. She knew that the biker could still try something, but she also knew she had the support of her friends and now others who cared about what was right. The sunlight reflected off the buildings, creating a warm glow around her, almost as if the world itself was backing her up. The biker paused, unsure of what to do next. His insults had lost their power. The girl's calm confidence, the supportive murmurs from the crowd, and the presence of two imposing figures across the street had changed everything. For the first time, he felt like he was facing consequences for his actions in real time. The girl took a deep breath, feeling proud of herself. She didn't need anyone to validate her courage. She had faced the mocking head-on, and she had done it with dignity. The crowd's attention was now on her, not the biker, and that made her feel stronger. As the scene began to settle, the girl rolled her chair a little faster, gaining momentum down the incline. She didn't feel afraid anymore. She felt powerful. She felt seen. And she knew that whatever happened next, she had already proven something important, not just to the biker, but to herself and everyone watching. And so, the afternoon continued, the city buzzing with life. But for one small corner of the street, something important had shifted. A young girl in a wheelchair had faced cruelty with courage, and the world had noticed. Across the street, two famous men watched silently, ready to step in if needed, but also quietly admiring the bravery of someone who refused to be defined by the limitations others tried to place on her. After the biker's laughter faded, a quiet tension hung in the air. People who had been watching started to whisper to each other, sharing surprised looks and shaking their heads. The girl's friend stayed close, walking beside her wheelchair with a protective presence that made her feel safer. She could feel their eyes on her, full of support and pride. Even though the biker was still near, there was a change in the energy around him, and he seemed unsure of what to do next. The girl took a deep breath, trying to calm the rush of emotions inside her. Her heart was still beating fast from the sudden confrontation, but she refused to let fear take control. She rolled forward slowly, gripping the wheels of her chair, feeling a quiet determination growing with every turn. She had faced insults before, but today felt different. Today she had stood her ground, and it had worked. Across the street, the two famous men who had been watching began to move slightly closer. They didn't make any sudden gestures, but their steps were deliberate, calm, and confident. Their presence alone made the biker shift uncomfortably on his motorcycle. It was as if the weight of their attention made him realize he was no longer in control. The girl noticed them, though she didn't yet know exactly who they were. There was something reassuring about the way they carried themselves, strong yet not threatening. The biker, sensing that his mockery had lost its power, tried a different approach. He revved his engine, hoping the loud noise would intimidate her, hoping to regain the attention of the small crowd that had gathered. "Hey, slowpoke, don't think a few words will make you look tough," he shouted, leaning slightly forward as if that could make him appear bigger and scarier. The girl ignored him. She didn't need to respond. She had already proven she could hold her ground, and she didn't want to give him the satisfaction of another reaction. Instead, she focused on the rhythm of her wheels, feeling the smooth pavement beneath her and the sunlight warming her skin. Every push of the wheel reminded her of her strength, her independence, and the fact that she could handle more than some people expected. Her friends spoke softly to her as they walked, offering encouragement. "You're doing great," one said. "Don't let him get to you." Another added, "You're showing everyone what real courage looks like." Their words were gentle, but they carried weight. They reminded her that she wasn't alone, that her bravery mattered, and that the support around her made her stronger. The biker, growing frustrated at the lack of reaction, decided to escalate in a different way. He circled slowly around her, his eyes scanning the crowd for approval, trying to find someone who would laugh at his antics. But instead he found eyes that disapproved. Some people shook their heads, muttering under their breath. Others subtly moved closer to the girl, creating a protective barrier with their presence. The biker's friends looked uneasy now, sensing that the fun they had expected was slipping away. The girl felt a strange mixture of fear and pride. She was aware that the biker could still try to intimidate her, but she also realized that she had already turned the situation around. She had taken control of her own story in that moment, refusing to let someone else define her worth. She felt her confidence grow with each second, and she realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. Across the street, the two men watched carefully. One of them nodded subtly to the other, and they began to move even closer. Their steps were deliberate, controlled, and calm, sending a silent message to the biker that his behavior was not acceptable. The girl noticed the shift in his posture. He no longer looked confident. Instead, he appeared uncertain, like a child caught doing something wrong. The girl decided it was time to speak again, not with anger, but with calm authority. "I don't need your approval, and I don't need you to laugh," she said, her voice steady. "Your words don't define me. I know who I am, and I am proud of myself." Her words carried through the small crowd, and people nodded, some murmuring their agreement. She could see a few of them smiling at her, quietly cheering for her bravery. The biker hesitated. He had expected to see fear, tears, or anger, but not calm strength. The crowd's attention had shifted from him to the girl. He could feel the weight of the stares from strangers and the silent presence of the two men across the street. He revved his engine again, but it no longer had the same effect. The roar felt small, weak, and almost desperate compared to the quiet power of the girl's words. One of her friends stepped slightly closer, speaking softly. "You're strong. Don't let him see you scared." The girl nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest. It wasn't just the support of her friends. It was the recognition of everyone around her, the shared understanding that cruelty did not have the final say here. She felt part of something larger, a community that valued respect and courage. The biker's frustration grew, and he tried one last time to assert dominance. "You think you're smart? You think you can talk back?" he shouted, leaning forward, trying to look imposing. But the girl did not flinch. She remained steady, her hands gripping the wheels, her eyes locked on him with quiet determination. She was no longer afraid of his words or his attempts to intimidate her. Across the street, the two men continued to move closer, now clearly part of the unfolding scene. They were not rushing, not threatening, but their presence alone seemed to change everything. The biker noticed them fully now, and a flicker of concern crossed his face. He had expected this to be a small, unnoticed act of mockery, but it had grown into something far bigger than he anticipated. The girl's confidence grew as she saw this shift. She realized that courage was contagious. Her calm, steady response had changed the energy of the crowd. People were watching her not as a victim, but as someone who had taken control of her story. She felt a sense of pride, not in defiance, but in the simple act of standing her ground with dignity. Her friends continued to whisper encouragements, reminding her that she had done something important. "You're showing everyone how brave you are," one said. "You don't need anyone else to make you feel small." Another added, "You're inspiring people just by being yourself." These words settled in her mind, reinforcing the belief that she was capable of more than she sometimes realized. The biker's attempt to regain control was failing. He looked around, trying to find support, but the crowd was no longer on his side. People were subtly moving closer to the girl, forming an invisible shield of approval and protection. His friends seemed unsure, no longer laughing or encouraging him. The energy had shifted completely, and he was left facing the consequences of his own cruelty. The girl took a deep breath and decided to continue her journey. She pushed her wheelchair forward, feeling the smooth pavement beneath her and the sunlight warming her face. Each turn of the wheel reminded her of her strength, her independence, and her ability to overcome challenges. She was no longer just reacting. She was moving forward, literally and figuratively, leaving fear behind. Across the street, the two men continued to observe, ready to step in if needed, but also silently acknowledging the girl's courage. They didn't need to intervene yet because she had already taken control of the situation. Their eyes held respect, a recognition of the quiet power she demonstrated. The crowd began to disperse slowly, some lingering to offer smiles and nods of approval. Others whispered to each other about the girl's bravery, clearly impressed by how she handled the situation. Even the street musician paused for a moment, nodding along to the rhythm of the girl's quiet determination. The biker, finally realizing that he could not intimidate her or regain control, muttered something under his breath and drove off slowly. His friends followed, leaving the street behind. The girl watched them go, feeling a strange mixture of relief and pride. She had faced cruelty and walked away stronger, unbroken, and dignified. Her friends gathered around her, offering words of praise and support. "You were amazing," one said. "You didn't let him see you scared." Another added, "You showed everyone what real courage looks like." The girl smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. She realized that bravery was not about being the loudest or the strongest. It was about standing firm in the face of adversity and refusing to let someone else define your worth. As they continued down the sidewalk, the girl felt a new sense of confidence. The sunlight felt brighter, the city seemed warmer, and the laughter of people around her seemed more meaningful. She had faced something difficult and come through it stronger. She had taken control of her story, and that made all the difference. Across the street, the two men watched her one last time before moving on to their own tasks. They had witnessed something remarkable, a young girl standing up to cruelty with courage, dignity, and strength. Their respect for her was evident in the way they looked at her, a quiet acknowledgement that she had handled something most adults might have struggled with. The girl's day continued, but something inside her had shifted. She felt stronger, more capable, and more aware of her own power. She had faced a challenge, and she had not only survived but thrived. The memory of the biker's mocking words began to fade, replaced by the sense of pride and accomplishment that came from knowing she had done the right thing. She rolled forward, her friends walking beside her, laughter and conversation returning naturally. The city continued its rhythm around her, but for one corner of the street, a quiet story of courage had unfolded, a story that would stay with her forever. The day continued to glow warmly as the girl moved down the street in her wheelchair, her friends close beside her. Even though the biker had driven off, the memory of the encounter lingered in her mind. She could still feel the weight of his mocking words, but instead of fear, there was now a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had stood her ground, and that mattered more than anything. As she rolled forward, she noticed that the crowd had not entirely dispersed. Some people had stopped along the sidewalk, watching her pass with approving smiles. A few had even taken out their phones to capture the moment, not in a way that would embarrass her, but as a recognition of something remarkable. It felt strange but uplifting to know that her courage had been seen. Her friends chatted quietly beside her, their voices soft but full of energy. "You were amazing," one whispered. "I can't believe how calm you stayed." Another nodded. "Yeah, you didn't just face him. You made everyone see that he was wrong." "That's huge." The girl smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. Their support was steady, grounding her even as the adrenaline of the encounter slowly faded. Across the street, the two famous men were still present. They hadn't left. They walked slowly, keeping a careful distance, observing quietly. They had seen her strength, her calm in the face of cruelty, and they were clearly impressed. There was no need for words. Their presence alone sent a powerful message. It reminded the girl, without saying anything, that she was not alone and that her courage mattered. The girl's mind wandered briefly as she continued down the sidewalk. She thought about how the biker had laughed, how cruelly he had spoken, and how easily someone could have been crushed by those words. But she also realized that she had not been crushed. Instead, she had risen above the attempt to hurt her, and that gave her a strange kind of peace. She felt a small smile curl on her lips. Strength wasn't about fighting or proving anything to someone like the biker. It was about holding herself steady and knowing her own worth. Nearby, a few younger children had stopped their play to watch her pass. They seemed fascinated, curious, and inspired all at once. Some of them whispered to each other, pointing at her and talking quietly about how brave she looked. She noticed them and smiled gently, a little wave from her hand making their eyes widen in surprise. It felt good to know that even small moments of courage could ripple out, touching others in ways she might never fully understand. The girl's friends continued to offer quiet encouragement. "You didn't just stand up to him," one said. "You taught everyone watching something important." Another added, "It's not just about today. People will remember this and it will make a difference." Their words sank into her mind, filling her with a sense of purpose. She had faced cruelty, yes, but she had also shown people, strangers, friends, and even herself, what true courage looked like. The two men across the street had moved a little closer now, though still keeping their distance. They didn't speak, but their eyes followed her carefully. The girl noticed their attention and felt a subtle reassurance. It wasn't about needing them to protect her. It was about knowing that strength and integrity could be recognized anywhere, even by people who were already strong and famous. It was a quiet validation, a reminder that doing the right thing often spoke louder than words. The biker's absence did not mean that the girl felt completely safe. She knew there were people in the world who thrived on putting others down, but she also knew that courage could be contagious. She could feel it growing inside her, a steady warmth that spread from her chest to her arms and hands as she pushed the wheels of her chair forward. She realized that facing cruelty head-on didn't just defend her, it also gave her power she hadn't known she had. As they continued along the sidewalk, they passed a small park. Children ran around, their laughter ringing in the air. Dogs barked happily and parents watched from benches. The girl took a deep breath, letting the normalcy of the scene wash over her. Despite the earlier tension, the world around her continued and she was a part of it, strong and present. Her friends began to talk about other things, lighter subjects, jokes that made them all laugh softly. The girl joined in, feeling her spirits lift. She realized that part of courage was returning to normal life, not letting fear or anger take over. It wasn't about holding grudges or dwelling on the cruelty she had faced. It was about moving forward and living fully, even after someone tried to knock her down. Across the street, the two men continued to watch. At one point, one of them spoke quietly to the other, their voices calm but intentional. Though the girl could not hear them clearly, she felt the weight of their presence, the sense that someone was looking out for her, even in a quiet, unobtrusive way. It was a reminder that courage could be recognized and respected, no matter who you were or what size you were. The girl began to notice the small details around her as she rolled through the city streets, the warmth of the sun, the smell of fresh bread from a nearby bakery, the sound of a gentle breeze through the trees lining the avenue. These details reminded her that the world was larger than any single encounter, and that there was beauty everywhere if she chose to see it. Her heart felt lighter. Her steps, or rather her wheels, felt steadier. A few more people had begun to gather along the sidewalk, not in a crowd, but in quiet appreciation. Some smiled, some nodded, and some whispered to each other about what they had seen. The girl felt a sense of connection, understanding that her actions, however small they seemed to her, were creating ripples of inspiration. She was no longer just a bystander in her own life. She was an active participant, showing strength and resilience in a world that sometimes tried to test it. Her friends were still walking beside her, their presence comforting. They talked about plans for the afternoon, for school, for hobbies and interests. She joined in naturally, laughing softly, feeling her confidence return fully. She realized that bravery didn't mean being serious all the time. It also meant enjoying life, feeling joy, and taking each moment as it came. The sun began to lower slightly in the sky, casting longer shadows and a warmer glow across the city streets. The girl felt a sense of peace. The encounter with the biker was behind her, a challenge she had faced and overcome. She knew there would be other challenges, of course, but she also knew that she could meet them with the same courage, calm, and dignity she had shown today. The two men across the street started to move on, their attention shifting to other matters, but their presence had already left a mark on the moment, reinforcing the idea that standing up for oneself and showing quiet strength could be recognized, respected, and valued. The girl watched them leave and felt a subtle inspiration, realizing that courage could exist in many forms and could touch people in ways she might not immediately see. As the afternoon turned toward evening, the girl and her friends continued their walk. The city around them was alive with energy, lights beginning to flicker on in windows, people finishing their work or errands, and the sound of distant traffic mixing with laughter and conversation. The girl felt a sense of belonging, a deep awareness that she was part of a community that could support and uplift her. She thought about what had happened earlier with the biker and realized something important. Courage was not about winning or proving someone wrong. It was about being true to oneself, standing firm and refusing to be diminished by the cruelty of others. It was about holding space for dignity, respect, and humanity, not just for oneself, but for anyone watching, anyone who might need an example to follow. Her friends noticed the reflective look on her face and nudged her gently. "You okay?" one asked. She smiled and nodded. "Yeah," she said softly. "I think I'm learning something important today." They walked on, the sun dipping lower, painting the sky with colors that seemed to echo the warmth she felt inside. The girl rolled her wheelchair with steady hands, feeling the rhythm of the wheels beneath her. Each turn reminded her that she was moving forward, that she was in control of her path, and that she had the strength to face anything. The memory of the biker, once so frightening, now felt small, a reminder of how far she had come and how strong she really was. By the time they reached the next corner, the city had settled into a gentle evening hum. Lights glimmered, shadows stretched, and the sounds of life continued around them. The girl felt a sense of pride not just for herself, but for the idea that courage, respect, and dignity could ripple out into the world in quiet, powerful ways. She knew she had taken a stand today, and it had already made a difference, even if only small and subtle. Her friends began talking excitedly about their plans for tomorrow, but the girl listened with a sense of calm satisfaction. She had faced a challenge, she had stood tall, and she had moved forward with her head held high. And as she rolled down the street, surrounded by friends and watched quietly by strangers, she realized that sometimes the smallest acts of courage could leave the biggest marks on the world. The girl and her friends continued their walk, their pace slower now, enjoying the gentle warmth of the evening sun. The city seemed calmer as the day began to wind down, and the air carried a quiet freshness from a breeze that rustled through the trees lining the street. Even though the biker had left, the memory of his words and actions lingered in her mind, but it no longer frightened her. Instead, she felt a quiet strength, a confidence that grew with every turn of her wheelchair wheels. Her friends noticed the thoughtful expression on her face and whispered quietly among themselves. "She's amazing," one said softly. "Did you see how calm she was? How she didn't let him push her around?" The other nodded. "Yeah, she handled it like a pro. I hope everyone watching realized that too." Their voices were gentle but full of admiration, and the girl felt a warmth in her chest knowing that her friends understood and supported her. As they moved through the streets, she noticed that some people still glanced in her direction, whispering among themselves or giving approving nods. It seemed that the story of what had happened was already spreading quietly through the city. Even strangers who had no connection to her seemed to recognize the courage it took to stand up against cruelty. She felt a strange but comforting sense of pride. It wasn't about showing off. It was about knowing she had done the right thing and that her actions mattered. Across the street, the two famous men who had observed the scene earlier were still nearby, though they had moved a little distance away, maintaining a quiet presence. They hadn't intervened physically, but their eyes followed the girl as she continued on her path. She could feel their attention, not in a way that was intimidating, but in a way that acknowledged her bravery. She realized that sometimes support doesn't need words or actions. Sometimes it's enough to simply be present, to silently say that courage is noticed and valued. The girl felt her thoughts drifting to the biker and the lesson she had learned from the encounter. She realized that cruelty often came from fear or insecurity, and that responding with anger or fear only gave it power. Instead, by staying calm, firm, and true to herself, she had shifted the energy of the situation. She had shown strength, not through shouting or confrontation, but through quiet dignity. That realization made her chest swell with quiet pride. Her friends, sensing her reflection, fell silent for a moment, walking beside her with a protective and supportive presence. One of them finally said, "You know what you did today? It wasn't just standing up for yourself. You showed everyone watching something important. You taught them a lesson without even trying." The girl smiled softly, grateful for their words. It felt good to be seen and understood, not just for surviving the moment, but for how she had handled it. They continued down a familiar street, past small shops and cafes beginning to close for the day. A few children played nearby, their laughter echoing softly, and the scent of freshly baked bread drifted from a nearby bakery. The girl noticed these small details, and they made her feel more grounded, more aware of the life continuing around her. She realized that courage didn't mean ignoring the world. It meant moving through it fully, even when faced with challenges. As they passed a small park, she saw families enjoying the last moments of sunlight. Some were walking their dogs, others were sitting on benches chatting and laughing. The girl felt a subtle shift inside her, a sense of belonging. She was part of this world, a world that could be beautiful and kind, even if cruelty sometimes appeared. She understood now that bravery wasn't about fighting the world, but about holding on to one's own dignity within it. Her friends spoke quietly among themselves, planning a small stop at an ice cream shop they liked. The girl joined in, laughing softly at their jokes and stories. The lightness of the moment was a stark contrast to the tension earlier, but it reminded her that courage didn't mean carrying fear or anger forever. It meant facing challenges, learning from them, and then continuing to live fully. The two men across the street had started moving toward a different direction, their attention no longer focused on her. But the girl felt the echo of their presence, the reminder that strength and recognition could come in many forms. It was a quiet encouragement, a lesson that courage often attracts respect even from people who are already strong or famous. She carried that lesson with her as she moved forward. The girl reflected on how her actions had affected the crowd earlier. People had whispered, nodded, and some had even smiled at her courage. She realized that by standing firm, she had given others permission to do the same, to stand up against cruelty, to support those who are vulnerable, and to recognize bravery in small moments. Courage, she realized, could ripple out, touching lives in ways that were invisible yet powerful. Her friends noticed her quiet reflection and matched her pace, letting her thoughts settle without interruption. "You know," one said softly, "sometimes I think people forget that courage doesn't have to be loud. It can be quiet, strong, and steady, and you showed that today." The girl nodded, understanding fully what they meant. Her calm response to the biker had not only protected her dignity, but also shown everyone that bravery can take many forms. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the city streets, the girl and her friends approached a small plaza. Streetlights began to flicker on and the hum of the city shifted toward evening. People moved with purpose, some heading home, others meeting friends or finishing errands. The girl felt a connection to all of it, a sense that life continued, challenges and all, and that she had the strength to navigate it. She thought about what had happened earlier, how the biker had tried to mock her, and how she had responded. She realized that fear often comes from expecting the worst, and that by refusing to give in to fear, she had taken control. Courage, she thought, was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to act despite it, to hold on to one's own worth even when someone tried to diminish it. Her friends began to talk about lighter things again, teasing each other and sharing funny stories from school. The girl joined in naturally, laughing softly and feeling her spirit lift. She realized that bravery wasn't about carrying tension forever. It was about moving forward, embracing life, and living fully even after difficult moments. Across the street, a few strangers who had witnessed the earlier encounter continued their day, but some glanced at her with quiet admiration. She felt a subtle reassurance knowing that her courage had been noticed. She didn't need anyone to validate her, but the acknowledgement felt warm, a reminder that even small acts of bravery could resonate beyond the immediate moment. The girl's mind wandered briefly to the idea of influence. She realized that her actions today could have a lasting impact, not just on the biker or the immediate crowd, but on anyone who heard about it, anyone who witnessed it, even indirectly. Standing up for herself had created a ripple of courage, a lesson in dignity and strength that might inspire others in ways she would never see. Her friends encouraged her gently, speaking softly about future plans, hobbies, and simple joys. The girl smiled, grateful for their presence. She realized that support from friends, family, and even strangers could amplify courage, making it stronger and more enduring. Life, she thought, was not just about facing challenges. It was about having people by your side who believed in you and reminded you of your own strength. As they reached the edge of the plaza, the girl felt a sense of calm determination. She had faced cruelty, stood firm, and moved forward with dignity. The city around her continued to hum with energy, but for her there was a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had learned something important, that courage was not about winning or proving someone wrong. It was about being true to oneself, holding on to dignity, and refusing to let others define your worth. The sun set gently behind the buildings, painting the sky with colors of pink and gold. The girl's heart felt light, her spirit steady. She realized that the encounter with the biker had not just tested her, it had strengthened her. She had learned that courage, calmness, and dignity could change not just her own experience, but the experience of those around her as well. Her friends laughed softly beside her, sharing small jokes and stories, and she joined in fully. The moment was simple, ordinary in one sense, yet profound in another. She had faced a challenge and emerged stronger, more confident and more aware of her own power. Life continued around her, vibrant and alive, and she felt ready to face whatever came next with the same quiet strength. As they continued down the street, the girl felt a sense of connection, not just to her friends but to the world around her. She realized that courage could be seen in small acts, in quiet resistance to cruelty, in the choice to move forward with dignity. Her heart felt full, her mind clear, and her spirit steady. She had faced a test and passed, and the lesson she carried was one she would never forget. The city lights began to glow more brightly, the evening air cooler and gentle against her skin. She felt a quiet sense of triumph, not in defeating someone else, but in standing firm and holding on to her own strength. Her friends walked beside her, smiling and chatting, and she joined in, feeling fully present, fully alive, and fully herself. The encounter with the biker had ended, but its impact remained, a reminder that courage could be quiet, steady, and powerful, and that facing cruelty with dignity could change not only her life, but the lives of those who witnessed it. And as she rolled onward, the girl knew that she carried with her a new sense of confidence, resilience, and the understanding that true strength comes from within. The evening settled over the city, turning the sky into a deep mix of purples and golds. Streetlights flickered on one by one, casting soft glows on the pavement.